Hang on, I just wanted to ask,
Are we recording? Because,
can you see it on your
okay,
side? Okay,
I
awesome.
do see it now.
Good morning, guys. Welcome to Keeping It Real. And this morning I have a wonderful guest called Rosemary Thornton, and I'm going to read a bit about Rosemary. Um, for 20 years, Rose Thornton enjoyed a national reputation as an expert on old houses. The author of 9 books, Rose has been featured on everything from PBS, which is History Detectives, to BBC Radio. In 2016, her husband committed suicide, and 2 years later, Rose was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. After routine medical procedure, Rose bled to death. In heaven, she was told if she agreed to return to earth, she'd be restored to wholeness. Subsequently, medical tests affirmed that not only had the disease disappeared, but she was also healed of the crippling grief. Welcome to Keeping It Real, Rose. Thank you for being here today.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, so tell us about this, gosh, suicide, first of all, losing a loved one to suicide. I'm most certainly seeing a lot of it as, being a medium. I'm seeing a lot of it in the last few years, and it's kind of, it is crippling, I can only imagine. How did you deal with the grief at the time?
Not well. It was completely unexpected. No, no warning. No idea this was going to happen.
Hmm.
It's pretty interesting. I prayed for this man a lot. I mean, he was my second husband, and I felt, in fact, my wedding vows to him said he was the answer to a lifetime of prayers. Because my first marriage had ended in divorce, which was hard. 24 years I was married to him. And the
Wow.
second husband, I mean, I waited 5 years and he came into my life. And, I had this prayer for 5 years when I felt lonely, between the two husbands, when I felt lonely or sad. And I think, oh, I guess I'll never find somebody to love again. I guess I'm just going to be alone the rest of my life. I would pray very specifically, thank you, God, for bringing the perfect man into my life at the perfect time. And that manifested in a lot of ways. One of them was a neighbor would show up on my door and shovel the snow in my driveway at just the right time. Or somebody would show up if I was in a threatening situation, somebody would show up and help me. So it was amazing how many ways that little prayer was answered. But I mean, I prayed that for so long, and my second husband seemed like the perfect man. And I just, it was so clear to me that this was an answer to a lot of hope and a lot of prayer. And yet, shortly before his death, I had a recurring nightmare. And I talk about this in my book. By the way, I've written 10 books, but the 10th book is the book
Oh,
about this experience.
okay.
The other 9 were about architecture. So this is a pretty radical shift in genres.
Wow.
But I had this recurring nightmare before his death, in the months before his death. And in the nightmare, my beloved husband died suddenly and violently. And I was thrust out of the home, our family home. And in the nightmare, I was wandering around trying to find a place to live because I couldn't go back to my home. And I thought, what in the world? And I would wake up, and sometimes, he'd be sleeping next to me. I would wake up and I would wake him up. And I would say, I just had this terrible nightmare. And he always would say, I'm not responsible for what happens in your dreams. But that nightmare went on and on and on. And I should have known. And I pay more attention now when I have a powerful dream like that. And then the second thing that happened that was very powerful is he was walking. We always had breakfast together. We always had a sit down breakfast. One of us made breakfast, and we really enjoyed just sitting down and chatting about our life. And he would he would get dressed, and he was heading to work. He had a white collar job and important man and all that. And as he was walking out the door to get to in his vehicle to go to work, I felt very clearly an angel beside me said, prepare yourself. He's going to be dead soon, and a new chapter of your life will start. And I shook it off and I thought, no, 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 I'm not accepting that. That cannot be that I finally found this man. We've only been together 10 years. No, that can't be right. And I really doubled down on my prayers. But, uh, he had dropped me off at the airport. I was headed to visit a daughter in Boston, and he dropped me. I'm sorry. Do you hear my cat meowing? Do you hear that sound? Can't stop him. I've turned off the furnace. I turned off the air. I've turned off the fans, and somebody's meowing at my feet.
That's okay. The kid's like, I want to be in this too, Mom. Like, I'm important.
He's like, I know this cat is so sensitive. The cat's like, look, this is very heavy. You need some comfort and you need to
Yes,
look at me.
yes.
But
Thank you for
anyway,
that.
he had
Because
dropped.
animals are incredibly sensitive, aren't they? And I can
Oh
just,
my gosh,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. Wow.
Last night I got embroiled in an unpleasant conversation with somebody, and the cat was just, jumping up and down and pouncing on my thighs like, "Hey, knock it off. Look at me instead." And I'm not a cat person, right? I didn't used to be.
Apparently
This
you
cat
are
came
now.
into my life. Yeah. And this cat does this thing if I don't pet him enough. He takes his little paw and goes, "Hey, hey, over here." He pops me over and over again until I finally stop and pet him. And now, of course, he's ascended the stairs to return from whence he came. But yes, he's very sensitive. And I know you could tell I was talking about this. Okay, she needs some support. We
Yeah.
need to come down here, meow a bit. But anyway,
They
so my
just get
husband
it there. They
left.
just get it. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
my husband left on a Monday morning. He drove me off to the airport. I flew to Boston, Massachusetts, about 800 miles from my home. And just as I landed, he called me, said some things that were not kind or nice or appropriate. And then the last thing he said was blaming me for upsetting him. And
Wow.
then he ended his life
And that's,
right after he hung up with me.
wow.
That's the last time I ever heard his voice. Last time I ever talked to him. So I lost my mind, and I I went insane. I just saw this thing on on social media. Imagine, but it was a man who had had a very traumatic, tragic event happened, and he went to a psychiatrist and he said, "I can't hold on. I'm losing my mind." And the psychiatrist said, I thought this is great advice. The psychiatrist said, "It's okay to go insane. Go ahead and go insane,
Mm.
but promise yourself you'll come back."
Wow.
And that really resonated with me because I went insane. I had, I guess, what we call a nervous breakdown, a psychotic break.
Yeah.
I couldn't function. I couldn't take care of myself. I lost 40 pounds.
Wow.
I literally couldn't swallow. I was living on those liquid nutrition supplements for a while because I just couldn't swallow anything. It's like everything just froze up, seized up. And I recognize now I was in shock
Yeah.
because I did have to leave my home.
Yeah.
This happened at our home. And I am a very sensitive soul. I mean, all my life, I felt very close to the angels, very able to hear things and see things that other people don't see and hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the reasons I was given so much warning about this happening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember very clearly, we had just had breakfast. He was walking out the door in his fancy going to town clothes to go to work. I so clearly remember that angel voice was very specific. It was not some vague feeling,
Yeah.
but it said, "Prepare yourself. This chapter of your life is coming to an end. He will
Wow.
be gone soon." So, being that level of a sensitive soul and then having this happen was devastating. And my faith, I mean, I had prayed so devoutly, so importunately for this man, and to have this happen, when you have relied on God and the angels your whole life, and that's taken away from you, or you think it's been,
Yeah.
it's like a ship that's just had its rudder taken off. So I lost my mind. I had a psychotic break. I didn't know where I was in the world. I just lost everything. And a friend took me in for 4 months. And there's way too much stuff on social media about staying away from toxic people. And I know there's merit. We got to be careful with whom we share our energy and our space.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have been so easy to describe me as toxic, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not fair because
Mm-hmm.
I was really screwed up. And I have very strong feelings about this. Uh, Suicide survivors are modern day lepers. We are isolated from society. People are so scared of the level of trauma and horror that we have been through. They
Mm-hmm.
want to keep their distance from us.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband was a fancy man with a fancy job and an important title. And we had lots of important friends, and we'd have these yard parties and lots of people would come and lots of food and, wine and good times and everything. Well, after his death, gone. I
Yeah.
never heard from any of them ever again.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating to me is the people who rushed in to the fray. were the people who had been on the periphery of my life, and they were not wealthy. They were not what the world would call well situated in life. They were the average folks who saw somebody sinking beneath the waves,
Yeah.
and they rushed in and saved me. And so one of these people took me in for 4 months, and she found out I'd been living out of my car, which
Wow.
frankly was very comfortable. It was a really nice car. And these people who think, well, it was a nice car, had a sunroof and heated seats and a good sound system.
I love that. Look for the gift. There's always a gift, eh?
It was a great car. I really like that car.
I could just imagine some like people walking past you and going, "Wow, she's styling it in her car."
Man, I like that car. And it's very comfortable. And it's also, I've since learned that often people who've been through trauma do enjoy sleeping in their car, whether or not they're homeless, because it's very cocoonish and it's a
Yes.
small space and it's a space under your control.
Yes.
Nobody's going to come into the room and say, "Hey, aren't you awake yet?
Yes.
Are you really going to lie in bed all day?" A
Yes.
car is like your own little private suite. But
Mm.
anyway, my friend Tracy found that I was starting to live out of the car because I couldn't go home and I couldn't be in people's homes. And my friend Tracy, she's she's a little short, 5 foot nothing, pretty easygoing woman. And yet, when she found out I was sleeping in that car, she said, "That's not happening again. You're coming home with me tonight." And
Mm.
I said, "No, I think that's very kind and very good of you, but no, I'm not." And I said, because, I'd had some success with my books and people knew me as the author, the lady who writes those books on architecture. Well,
Mhm.
now I was just this sad little limp rag of a sorry mess.
Yeah.
So I told Tracy, no, that's not going to happen. The woman you knew before is dead and gone. And I said, I wake households up with my screaming and my nightmares. I can't sleep. I can't eat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Tracy said, "You're coming home with me tonight, and that's that. We're going to do this for one night. If it doesn't work out, it's fine." And that was genius. If you find somebody in shock or trauma or out of their mind, don't say, "Come live with me for 4 months." Say, "Tonight, just
Yes.
tonight,
One day
you
at a
come home with me."
yes.
Right. I was literally one of the best pieces of advice I got from anybody said, learn how to live in 15-minute increments. And I thought that was very good.
Mm.
And that's what I was doing. So I went home with her one night and I had not been able to eat solid food at all. And I had lost an inordinate amount of weight and I didn't care. I figured I'd be dead soon. I mean, I
Wow.
really planned on being dead soon.
Wow.
I was kind of looking forward to it. I just figured there's no other way that this can right itself.
Yeah.
And, during this time, I had 3 prayers that I prayed pretty consistently. One was, "God, heal me or let me die." I knew I could not go on in this state. The second prayer was, "When I die, spare me the life of you." I had always been a big fan of NDE stories, stories where people die and are resuscitated. Boy, I had loved those stories. And then my third prayer was, "I can't handle any more decisions." At this period in my life, my husband left behind some legal messes that had to be tidied up. And there were all these big decisions, not to mention one of the largest banks in America foreclosed on me after his death. The payments on our home were current, but he was the primary lien holder. And they
Wow.
saw that as an opportunity to come take the home. And at the time, I had a significant, more than 50% equity in that home. They didn't care. They foreclosed on me. So there
Wow.
were just too many decisions to make, all very hard. So those were my 3 daily prayers. So I spent that first night with Tracy and she cooked dinner. And I looked at her and I said, "Tracy, maybe you didn't get the memo, but I can't eat solid food anymore. I just can't.
Mm.
Sometimes I would just choke on it, literally. And the smell made me sick."
Mhm.
And she said, "You know what? I'm going to sit right by you and we're going to say a prayer over this food and we're going to bless this food. And if you eat one bite, that's okay. And if you can't eat anything, that's okay." She said, "But I'm going to sit right here with you." And she did.
Oh,
And she talked to me the whole time. And she didn't say, "You're going to be just fine," or these things have a way of working out, or my personal least favorite, "all things work together for good to them that love God." I mean, that Bible verse has a place, but it's not for somebody whose husband put a bullet in his head. That is not the place for that Bible verse.
yeah.
But she just sat beside me and she said, "I'm so proud of you that you're still here with us." She said,
Yeah.
"Because when I first heard my husband's death made news all over." And she said, "When I first heard about your husband," she said, "I pulled over to the side of the road to cry." And she said, "I thought to myself, we're going to lose Rosemary." nobody can survive this, and certainly not sensitive Rosemary.
Yeah.
So she's sitting beside me at her kitchen table with this wonderful little simple meal she's made, a meal made with love in every sense of the word. She just talked to me about that she was so grateful I was her friend, and she was so grateful I was in her life.
I'm sorry.
And I thought,
What a beautiful story. Gosh. I'm like, oh, here I go. It's just,
it's true. And I was thinking, I'm looking at myself, and I actually, during this time, I couldn't even step into a shower because just being in a shower, you're alone with your thoughts.
yeah,
And when you've been through severe trauma and you're in shock and you're alone with your thoughts,
yeah,
bad news.
yeah,
I actually developed a minor skin infection from not bathing. And that
yeah,
was one of the things she'd do is she'd walk me to the shower and she'd say, I'm going to be outside this door praying for you while
yeah,
you're in that shower and you can do this.
yeah,
And she said, you don't need to wash your hair, but you get in there and you scrub some of the stuff off your skin. That's, it's time for that. But anyway, sitting at that meal, she just talked to me about how grateful she was I was her friend. And I thought, you were grateful I was your friend, but that girl's gone. And
yes,
she said, no. And what she said to me, even then, she said, I don't know how this ends, but I know that you will emerge from this story as a victor. She said, you are not wired to be a victim. And she said, there will be a day, she said, I don't know how or what, but that where millions will hear your story and it will bless them and help them. And I would say, I love you, Tracy, but you're crazy as a bed bug. People kill themselves a lot. Why is my story special? And
yeah,
I'm not handling this well. Anyway,
yeah.
and subsequently, my story's been heard by about 15 million people now.
Gosh, that's
So turned out
amazing.
she was right.
Yeah.
So she
Yeah.
sat there with me. She
But
sat there with me at this meal.
what I love is like how your faith, clearly there was a guide, and there was an angel, and she was the earth angel. She was guided to, and
Oh, very much so.
it takes me back to how if we just have one person care or show up in that moment, you never know how life-changing that can be. And that's where I feel like
That's
we're
the
all
thing.
starting to go back to that simple way of life because it takes nothing to care. It takes nothing to smile at somebody and just say, "How are you today?" Like really connect, really, really connect.
Yes, that is huge. And this woman, she was a friend, but I saw her maybe 3 or 4 times a year. We'd go out and have lunch together, and we just, it was just a lighthearted friendship.
Yeah,
And yet you talk about God putting somebody in your life. And then she worked a hard, stressful job. And anyway, what I was going to say during that meal, she just talked about that everything was going to work out somehow and that
yeah,
I was going to come out of this. And I looked down at my plate and she pointed to my plate and she said, look, you've eaten half your meal. And I thought, hmm, how did that happen? And she patted my hand and she said, things have already started to get better, haven't they?
yeah,
And I thought, wow, I guess they have. I lived with her and I left every day and I would go sleep in my car or go sit in a park or somewhere. And then I would come back every night and eat dinner with her and her husband. And she told me later that oftentimes when she would come in the bedroom, because she'd come into the bedroom at night after I was asleep and in bed, and oftentimes at night she'd come in there and I would be writhing in bed. I would be moaning. I'd be crying. Even in sleep, I had no peace. I
yeah.
had such horrible nightmares.
Wow.
When somebody does this, the level of violence involved to the human body is unimaginable, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So I have a really good, strong visual memory. That's how I built my career. I have a great memory for images, for houses. But anyway, she said I'd be writhing and crying and screaming in bed, just literally, flailing around in the bed, looking asleep. And she would stand at the foot of the bed and pray for me. And she would ask the angels to comfort me, to be with me, to calm my thought, to calm my spirit. And she told me this, I think about 2 years after all this, but she said invariably, you would settle down. Your breathing would even out. You'd calm down and you'd settle into a peaceful sleep. And she said, and then I'd walk out of the room. And she also told everyone in her church to put me on their prayer list.
yeah,
And it was just, what we do to people who survive suicide in this country is so wrong. We isolate them.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
We isolate them. And part of the problem was I wrote a book on a goofball niche topic, and that book did really well. And it sent me to wonderful places, and I had wonderful experience. And this was even before I met my second husband. This book did so well for me.
Yeah.
So my friends saw me as this woman who had written a book on a little funny niche topic and was just by almost sheer force of will and prayer had become successful in terms of being an author. And they didn't understand how I went from this strong-willed, independent, capable, intelligent woman
Yeah.
to losing my mind.
Yeah.
And nobody could wrap their mind. And so people kept their distance from me. People just kind of backed off. But Tracy and others literally ran into this mess. So yeah, if I was queen of the world, and it shouldn't be long now, or so I hope, but I would find a way that when somebody's loved one, a child or a spouse ends their own life, that we send in a group, we send in somebody to just be with them, to help them.
Mm.
We teach people what to say. You don't say, "Is there anything I can do for you?" You say, "You know what? I'm going to church Sunday morning. Can I come by here and pick you up?"
Yeah.
Or, "I make too much for my family every night. Can I bring you a dish every night for a while? Bring you a casserole every night?" Or, "Can I walk the dog for you every other day?" Come up with something specific, because one of the great challenges of people like me is we have trouble getting out of bed. We have trouble brushing our teeth. We have trouble facing the day. We have trouble eating. We have trouble doing anything.
Yeah.
And shock is an amazing thing. So I stayed with Tracy for 4 months, and she gave me so much healing. And it's kind of amazing. You have to be a strong person to do this. And that's the thing. Most people aren't that strong. Most people see somebody like me in a mess and they just want to stay far away. They don't want to be anywhere near that.
Incredible. It's incredible that that happens, and thank you for sharing that because one of my questions was going to be, and you've actually answered it, is what to do because here in New Zealand, suicide is not highlighted. It's ridiculous. I cannot understand it being, coming from South Africa because as I was sharing with you before we, started recording this, was that we had somebody in our local community, strong guy, 34 years old. I could sense there was something, I said to my husband the one day, he's not happy, he had this beautiful black dog and he was in our local coffee shop almost every day and he was found by his girlfriend last week Saturday. And you've planted seeds for me because it's going to her and saying, how can we help? Because she found him. And then he was put on life support for 2 days. And, it devastates the community. You could feel the ripple effect energetically. Like we all just went into this sort of subdued space. And they had his memorial service, but it's not highlighted in New Zealand. It's kind of like, let's just keep this hush hush. And it's like, no, guys, come on. We need to show that there's stuff going on and people, because you never know. That was going to be a question, is, you said you had no idea that your husband would have ever, and that is such a
None.
profound moment because so many people go, why didn't I know? Where were the signs? How come I didn't see the signs? And sometimes you just don't see the signs, they just carry on with life.
You don't see the signs. If somebody wants to hide it, you're not going to see anything or know anything. And look at me, I was having prescient dreams. I
Yeah.
was having prescient people, spiritual beings talk to me and say, prepare yourself. And I was working it hard. No. And one of the things that enrages me, there are a lot of things that enrage me about this whole suicide, these ideas that are so wrong. But one of them is suicide prevention. If you're feeling sad, just reach out.
Mm-hmm.
I see that on social media so much. Does that mean my husband didn't think I was good enough to talk to? No. When somebody decides they're going to do this, there's really not much you can do to stop them unless maybe they're a young person. By young person, I mean maybe who knows, under 25, under 20, I don't know. But
Yeah.
all I hear when I hear about suicide prevention is they have no idea what they're talking about. And yeah, maybe we can stop it in kids, which is good. I'm 100% behind that. But when it comes to a 63-year-old man, no.
Yeah.
Somebody who's made up their mind to do this. But that whole thing of if you're feeling sad, call me. You can call me at any time. I was sleeping next to the man. I
Yeah.
listened to his stories. I held his hand. I did this thing that he had this gorgeous silver beard. He was a very handsome man. He had this beautiful silver beard, and I would grab either side of the beard, gently, and I'd pull him to me and I'd say, I am so in love with you. I am
Uh,
just so in love with you. And I would say, I love you. And Teddy, the dog, loves you. And God loves you most of all. But you are so loved.
mm,
And I mean, I did everything. I think I did everything right that you can do for a husband that you love. And yet this was the outcome. So suicide prevention, we got to be real careful how we talk about suicide prevention, because what we're saying to survivors like me, and that's what we're known as suicide survivors, because we have survived the death of a close loved one to suicide. What you're saying is you missed something, coulda, woulda, shoulda. You missed something here,
yes,
which is wrong. And the
yes,
other thing going on is guilt. Back in the 70s in the United States, and of course, I don't know the history of New Zealand, but back in the 60s and 70s, if a woman was a victim of sexual assault, she got put on the stand and asked, well, what were you doing out at 3 a.m? Why were you
yes,
wearing that dress?
yeah,
That dress was awfully short. Those heels, and you'd been to a bar. What's a woman doing at a bar at that hour?
yeah,
We don't do that anymore. We recognize how utterly wrong that is. And we got to start doing that with suicide, because the spouse or the parents, heaven forbid, get most of the blame. I went to a suicide support group, again, for people like me. And this one woman stood up and she said, my son had so much pressure on him. My son was so miserable, so unhappy, and he'd still be alive if it wasn't for that rotten woman he was married to. And I was like, oh, got
mm,
it. And I left. So that's what we got to stop. The person to blame is the person that did the thing, not the people around him. And
yes,
odds are good, the person who committed suicide was loved and had somebody in his life that was really hoping they'd stay on this earth. And so this thing of, suicide prevention is really just a backdoor way of assigning guilt, and it's wrong.
yeah,
But yeah, the other thing, I mean, we are treated like lepers. And the only reason I survived is so many, I mean, as an answer to my prayers. I had a blog. I had a really popular blog that got anywhere from 500 to 5,000 hits a day. So it's a pretty popular blog. And I just started posting on this blog, pray for me. I'm losing my mind. I feel I'm slipping away again. Please pray for me. And
mm,
people would. And they would leave the most beautiful comments. And there were days I couldn't find a way to face another minute. And I'd lie down on my bed, and I had a smartphone, and I would read those comments people had left at my website about how they are praying for me, that they are holding me up. If I'm too weak to hold myself up, they are holding me up in prayer. They are surrounding me with light and love. They are pouring energy into my heart, mind, and soul. I mean, so many beautiful comments. And I would put that phone on my chest and just lay back in bed and say, okay, somehow I'm going to absorb all the love that these people are showering me with,
mm,
even though we're not connected physically. Love is the connector. Love is the connector that overcomes time, space, and any other dimension. And I would just see myself the recipient of so much love. And I
mm,
would just think about that. And boy, I would just dwell on that and cling to that and hang on to that. But yeah, we are isolated terribly as suicide survivors. So that went on for 2 years, and well, it went on for 29 months. And then was out in the yard doing some stuff, and I just wanted to die. I prayed every night that God would let me go. Like I said, my prayer was, God, either heal me or let me die. I was
mm,
leaning hard toward the let me die. And I was out in the yard doing some yard work, and I picked up a 60-pound bag of rock to do some landscaping, and I felt something happen internally, and I ended up having to go to a gynecologist, and she said, well, you've got cancer. You've got cervical cancer.
mm,
And she sent me to an oncologist, and he said, yep, stage 2, cervical cancer's already spread. And they did a minor medical procedure, made a little boo-boo, nicked a little artery or something. And yet I told them after I came out of the surgery, because this, again, with very sensitive souls, and I am one. And like I said, I've always been fascinated reading about NDEs, because I always knew, even as a child, I knew heaven was my home. They were just kind of hanging out here, picking up some spiritual lessons and growing in grace and learning how to be love and how to, oh my gosh, one of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott. Are you familiar with her? Bird by Bird. She wrote that book. Well, she
no.
said, we're here on earth to learn how to endure the beams of love.
Oh, I
And I
love
thought,
it. Wow.
that's why we're here. We're
Awesome.
learning how to absorb, accept, and experience the beams of love. And so I knew that. I knew that intrinsically. So the doctor, after the surgery, I was I was sitting up on, or I was in recovery. Actually, what I was going to say was the surgery took 30 minutes. It took them 3 hours to awaken me from the anesthesia. And I
Wow.
said, I've never been anesthetized, so please go easy on me. And they thought, I was making it up. But people like me, sensitive souls, and there's a lot of us, we're very sensitive to pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals often hit us in very unexpected ways and with very draconian effects. So anyway, 3 hours later, they wake me up and they encourage me to get up and go to the bathroom. And I do. And I come back and I say, I'm bleeding profusely. They say, oh, once you get home and lie down, you'll be fine. And they said that 2 more times. So off I went home, get home, and I realized I'm bleeding to death. And I stepped into my big, beautiful walk-in white tiled shower because when you're bleeding to death, you really don't want to mess up the white carpet in your house. Housekeeping is paramount.
The
You know what a
fact
mess that is.
that you clearly your architecture background is like, Let me think about that. Hold on. Okay, yeah.
Do you
So
remember
it's been
there was a
handy.
popular there was a popular detergent, a popular American, I mean, I guess it's worldwide detergent that would show this is back in the 80s, but they would show washing blood out of a t-shirt. And there was a comedian, actually, it was Jerry Seinfeld, said, if you got that much blood in a t-shirt, you got bigger problems than which laundry detergent to pick.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought about that, I was bleeding everywhere. I mean, it was a mess. And I was like, oh, don't get it on the carpet. Don't want to have my children clean this up.
Yeah.
What a mess this will make.
Oh my gosh. Aren't we
We're
funny,
so well
you and
behaved,
me?
aren't we?
I know.
Pardon me?
We're so funny. It's like, just in case, just in case. Hold on.
I know. I know. We're just all women are so well behaved. I don't want to
Oh.
make a mess by bleeding to death right here. I'm going to go over there and bleed to death. So that's why I was in the shower. It's not hard to wash blood off tile, but man, on that white I had some real pretty carpet. That was some good looking carpet. And it was brand new, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. I paid good money for
Just
this
this
carpet, man.
I know. And it was so pretty. Every time I walked into my bedroom, I'm like, that is just so pretty having that white carpet. And, I don't have any dirt. I don't have any kids to mess it up. It's just so pretty to look at. So yeah, I'm standing in the bathroom because I'm thinking, it's easier to get it off tile than it is carpet.
Yep.
So anyway, I stepped into my shower because it's even easier to clean up the shower if you're bleeding to death.
My gosh.
So I'm in the shower and I'm thinking, I was standing in the shower and I'm watching all this blood come out of my body, and it is kind of, discomforting to see all that mess, and
Wow.
I, I remember thinking, you've been asking God to heal you or let you go. And I had planned to end my own life so many times in so many ways. I had a plan, I had a place, I had the means, I had it all figured out. And I thought, 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, God will show you a way out. And I thought, my prayers have been answered. All I
Mhm.
have to do is sit down on the floor of this shower. I'll be gone in probably minutes at this rate of bleeding. I thought, not a bad deal. And then I thought, so many people, I thought about Tracy and I thought about the other people who had done so much trying to save me. And
Mhm.
I thought, is this fair to them that they have given up months of their life to keep Rosemary alive? And now I let myself die.
Mhm.
So I decided to leave the shower and I stepped out, wrapped myself in several towels first. Again, I'll sacrifice a towel, but not the white carpet.
The
And of
white,
course, I'm
do you
looking for the
still
ratty,
do you still
I
have
know, I'm
the
looking for
white
the ratty
carpet?
towels.
Do
Do I
you
still
still
have the
have
what?
do you still have the white carpet? Do you have that carpet to this day? Or have you sold it or
No,
got
I
rid of
sold the house. Yeah, I sold the house, but I did save the carpet. Not
it?
one drop spilled on that carpet. So I found the rattiest towel in my bathroom and wrapped it around myself and then hustled out to the hardwood floor because, but yeah, I did hustle out to the hardwood floor because I'm like, if I'm going to bleed, it's going to be a hardwood floor. That's so easy to clean up. But I did. And I really did do all this stuff. It sounds unbelievable, but it's all true.
Crazy,
Because
isn't
have
it?
you ever cleaned up a mess? It's
Mhm.
hard,
It's freaking hard. I know. You remind me of when we moved into this house here. We had one of those 1970s ovens that lifted up. So there was a top oven and a bottom oven, a smaller one, but the element was open. And the ovens today don't have the element that's open. And 3 times I'd made this amazing dish in a Pyrex dish, a glass dish, and I heard this and then shh, and I was like, oh,
Oh,
first
no.
time, great, second time, third time, I had an absolute menopausal moment. My husband said he's never seen me so angry. Excuse my language, but I was like, because I didn't want to clean it up. I was just like, I'm so tired of cleaning, because you have to wait for it to cool down, and then you have to like lift the element up and clean. So I hear
Oh,
you. I completely hear you. So we got a new oven. My menopausal moment helped me get a new oven. Because my husband
good.
literally ran from the garage and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was just like, "I can't handle the cleaning. I'm
Yeah.
dying, come on." So I hear you. So blood's a whole different ball
Oh
game.
my God. On a white carpet. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh,
So did you call
anyway,
911? What happened then?
they called 911, an ambulance came, they took me to an itty bitty ER. It was an ER not connected to a hospital. And they made some more boo-boos there, finish me off, send me to my reward.
Wow.
And I mean, they were trying their best. They didn't say, let's see if we can finish her. They were trying to figure out what was going on and how to fix it, but they were way out of their element. What should have happened, I should have been transported to a trauma center who could say, egads, but a guy I learned later, a gynecological bleed is considered a life-threatening emergency because it turns out you can bleed to death pretty quickly from your lady parts.
Hmm.
But this really nice RN was to my, I'm on a gurney in this little ER, and this really nice RN um, sees that I'm frightened because this day has just gone from bad to worse.
Wow.
And
Sure.
this RN is attending me and talking to me, and I looked at her and through tears I said, "Promise me you're not going to let me die." And she said, "Oh, honey, we have many solutions for this. We're not going to let you die." And she was so motherly and so comforting and so genuine, so sincere. So they do some stuff, and I don't know why, but they left me there. They left the doctor and the RN both stepped out of the room. And I had a friend there who stayed right with me. And they had given me some Dilaudid, which is a morphine derivative to help with the pain. And they stepped out of the room after they gave me that, and that probably wasn't smart. And it also probably wasn't a great idea to give me that when I told them, and this is the thing, people don't listen to women. Did you know, I wish I knew the stats, but women tend to die from heart attacks because they're dismissed at major hospitals by being told, well, that's a stress attack, or you're having a panic attack. You can't let the stress get to you like that. We have radiating jaw pain and all the other symptoms, and they're sent home. And I had told at every point in turn, I had told all the medical people, I am bleeding to death.
Wow.
Something has gone very wrong.
Yeah.
And they were all dismissive.
Wow.
Everybody. They're like, oh, you're going to be okay. So they step out of the room. My friend stays with me, thank goodness. And he says, I lost consciousness pretty quick from that Dilaudid. Dilaudid's a very powerful drug. And I was already down a few pints. I mean, that
Wow.
was pretty serious business. But my friend says he's looking at my they had left me hooked up to a blood pressure cuff that automatically cycles and checks your blood pressure. And he said at one point, he said he looked up at the blood pressure cuff and it said 34 over 25, which is pretty much dead. And
Wow.
he stood up to go get some help because that is blood pressure that's very life threatening. And he said as he stood up, he said my eyes popped open, and he said I tried to sit up on the gurney, and there's a word for this. Oh man, I can't. It's oh my gosh, but there's a word at the very end of life. Often there's a burst of energy, and
Yes.
we have a little bit of energy to do stuff that is humanly impossible,
You bounce
like
back.
trying to sit up on a gurney
Yes. It's
when your blood
amazing.
pressure is 34 over 25.
Yeah.
So I tried to sit up, but I couldn't. And he said, you reached your arms up like this. You looked up, and he said, you looked straight up, above my head. And he said, you wiggled your fingers almost like somebody was coming to pick me up.
Wow.
And he said, after that, your head went back, your arms flopped down. And he said, and then your blood pressure went to error, which meant it was so low it couldn't even get a reading. So it was lower than 34 over 25. And I think that's when I left for heaven, because meanwhile, I just so distinctly remembered being awakened from a deep, dreamless sleep. And I was catapulted out of my body. And I mean, catapulted. It was so dramatic. I went flying out of that body like toast out of a toaster. And I mean, it was almost to the point of jarring.
That's
And
amazing.
having read all these NDE books, I'm like, whoa, I've
This is
just
what
died.
it's
Actually, my great,
like. Woohoo!
yeah,
I'm going.
I, I did everything right. And I still got the easy exit out. And
Wow.
I remember my very first thought was, my heart is stopped. And I thought, how do I know that? I thought, I don't know, but I know that's right. And then and I'm hurtling away from my body. And I was in this perfect pitch black, velvety, velvety blackness. It's the only way I can describe it. And this blackness, and I couldn't see anything, this blackness was actively infusing me with peace. And, and with that is love, but just peace. It was just like I was being supercharged. I'd been dipped in this vat of perfect peace, and it was actively infusing me. And that's the only way I can think to describe it. And the peace was fantastic. But I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is great. But I remember one of my next thought was, uh, I'm dying. And then I thought, actually, you're not dying, you're dead. Because when you're going on to your reward, the most important thing is correcting your tense, And ever the writer,
Of course.
I want to make sure
The
I
author
got
in
that
you
right.
had to come out, eh?
That's right. So I thought that was pretty darn funny. And the other thing is being a writer, I ruminate constantly, thinking, oh, I'm overthinking everything. I know I'm overthinking everything. Why am I overthinking everything? I don't know, but I am overthinking. I'm overthinking now. But I mean, that's the strain of
Like you're a
thoughts that
little
runs through my head.
cartoon character. You're like a little cartoon character, Rosemary. I think we need to put a little cartoon, little glimpse together, like.
Oh my gosh. And I'm saying all this out loud to myself in this new experience. And I'm thinking, you're funny. I'm thinking that to myself. I'm still funny. I've always been funny and I'm still funny. And I thought, and I remember when I said, you're not dying, you're dead. And then I did think, you're dying and you're correcting your tense. And I thought, and it cracked me up and I laughed out loud. And I heard myself laugh. I heard my own funny little Rosemary giggle. And I thought, whoa, even my giggle has gone with me. And I thought, I don't have lungs. I don't think. I'm not making breath sounds. Pretty sure I don't have vocal cords. And yet I'm producing sound and I hear sound. And somebody said to me, well, this was all telepathic. I said, no, it was no more telepathic than what I'm doing right now. This felt very clearly like a specific manifestation of voice and hearing. And so I'm thinking through this all because I've always, I've again an overthinker, but I'm thinking through all this and I think I still have my crazy macabre sense of humor. I still have my quirky little laugh. I still have my very unique voice. I still have memories of everything that's happened to me. And I thought, what did I leave on that gurney? And I thought, I left behind anxiety, guilt, regret, doubt, fear, panic. All the negative things were what was left behind. And I thought, being a writer, an over anxious, overthinking writer, I'd always wondered what I'd look like without all that. With all that taken away, what would I really be like? And I thought, this is what I would be like. And I thought, this is wonderful. This is great. And I cannot begin to tell you how comforting it was that my intellect, my sense of humor, my quirky sense of humor, that all that stuff was with me. And I was thinking, it felt in some ways like I was thinking 1,000 thoughts at once. And it felt like my whole life, I thought of myself as kind of smart. My whole life, I felt like I'd been on 60 amps and I felt like I'd been upgraded to 100,000 amps. I just felt like everything was clear and a Bible verse came to me. So much stuff happened. But one of the things this Bible verse was, the Apostle Paul talked about the peace that passeth all understanding. And I thought, this is what he was talking about. I could never tell people what this peace is like. I could never define or explain this peace, but this was the peace. And I thought, I remember all my Bible verses too, because I've spent a lifetime reading the Bible. I thought, this is just great. And about this time, I'm just thinking all this through and
I need to
so
write a book. What are
grateful.
you thinking? I need to write a book on this.
Yeah, no books. I decided, yeah, I had no plan to come back. Even having read all these NDE stories, I knew what was happening.
Yeah.
It was obvious. I had no plan to come back, and that turned out. But anyway, I had this
Well,
massive spirit.
we're glad you're back, okay?
Well, thank you. This massive spiritual being appeared at my left and slightly behind me and very tall. And I
Mhm.
turned around and I thought, what am I turning? It's like I'm still in a human form. I'm turning my head and looking over my left shoulder. And I looked up and I'm happy, happy, happy. I mean, really genuinely happy. And I said to this massive spiritual being, I said, and who are you? And before I could even finish the sentence, and I know everybody says that, but I didn't get it until I experienced. Couldn't even finish the question, and who are you? But the answer was immediate. The answer was you, Rosemary. You are the image and likeness. I'm the original.
Oh
And
my
I was like, that's
God.
First Genesis 26 and 27. Isn't that
Goosebumps.
fantastic?
I got goosebumps, yeah.
The original. And every time now, I mean, some days I still get sad, and some days I'm out and I see the word the original anywhere, and I smile and I remember, oh yeah, there's an original. I'm just the image and likeness. And
Yeah.
my whole life I'd wondered, what does it mean to be made in the image and likeness of God? And that simple sentence, just like again, an infusion of knowledge. I get it. I'm the image and likeness. There's an original. It was so incredible. And then this experience went on and on and on and on and on. And is measured by time. I was dead for 10 to 15 minutes, more than 10 minutes. And yet it felt like to me it was hours, hours and
Wow.
hours and hours. And one of the things that happened was I'm still floating away in this blackness, thinking about all this stuff and how great this is. My whole life I've kept a daily list of 5 things for which I'm grateful every single day. Every day, 5 things for which I'm grateful. Well, through this experience, I kept thinking, I'm so grateful I'm gone. I'm so grateful it's over. What's next? What's next? What are we doing now? I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful. And somebody wrote me a letter and they said, you can't have been that grateful to be dead. And I was like, yes, I can. And I was that grateful to be gone. And it's not dead. We're just changing addresses. It's
Yes.
just boom from here to there.
Yes.
But this went on. One of the things that happened
Mm.
was this angelic being. Many came to me. And again, I'm still in this blackness. But one of them, I asked one of them, I said, I've been here before in this blackness floating away from my body. I mean, like in this 59-year experience, I've been here before. And I said, but I don't understand. And the angelic being said, remember, your mom told you that when you were an infant, you almost died. And to everyone's surprise, it turned around and then you were healed and made whole. And the angel said, you didn't almost die that night. You did die and you were sent back. And I thought that explains so much. Like growing up, I would say to my mom, oh, Aunt Sally just passed. And she'd say, what are you talking about? I'd say, well, she just walked past and waved at us. She came to
Wow.
say goodbye. And
Wow.
you learn early on to keep your mouth shut about those things.
Mhm.
And I had always been so sensitive
Mm.
and sometimes experiencing things that make no sense. I mean, I remember one time I was I had a vision of being on a plane and there was a fire on the plane. And I watched the horror on the people's faces as this fireball moved through the plane. And I said, I can't be here. It's a vision, just a vision. And then a day later, I learned about a fire that had happened just as I had seen. So there's something to being sensitive that we just have to keep our mouths shut about sometimes.
Mm.
So even as this angel is telling me, you died then and you were sent back as an infant, I thought, you know what? That would have been good to know back there on that earth experience. But hey, thanks for telling me now. Got it. What's
You know
next?
what
Where are we
you know what
going?
I love is like your cheeky personality still came through. Like, seriously, dude, seriously, do you know what it's like back there? And he's just like, mm-hmm.
One of the things that happened, I mean, I have felt like such what's the word? Such a weirdo my whole life. This earth is not kind to sensitive people.
Sure.
And one of the things that happened is I was with my tribe in this blackness floating away.
Mhm.
I was with my tribe and they kind of surrounded me and they just smiled. They just smiled. And if I could sum the whole thing up in 3 words, it would be welcome home, dearie. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh, I
Mhm.
am home.
Mhm.
There's an old song. I think it's from the early 1900s, but it's going home, I'm just going home. And that's what it felt like, was
Beautiful.
just going home.
Wow.
So
Oh,
this just went on and on and on.
you
And
have
at
a
some
beautiful
point I'm,
voice. You have a beautiful
oh,
voice.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Wow.
very much. At some point I was no longer floating, but I was in a white room, and it really feels like somebody took my batteries out because I'm enjoying the whole experience, and I don't remember how I went from that blackness floating, but I'm in this white room and I'm on my own 2 feet and I'm, legs. And I remember seeing a door in the distance and I'm thinking, I know what that door is. Everybody out of my way. We don't need to talk about this. I am going to run toward that door. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I have legs or feet or what, but I know if I can perambulate with intention. And then that was actually my very words, perambulate with intention. Only a writer would say perambulate
Yeah,
with
I'm like, I need to
intention.
Google that. What does that mean?
Walk.
Okay. It's that simple. Walk. Okay.
Yeah. Because a perambulator, that's what they used to call the old fashioned strollers, was a perambulator.
Okay. Wow. I didn't know
Because you're
that. Thank
walking the
you.
baby.
Yes. Okay.
So yeah, because
How
I
did
didn't know
you
if I had feet.
say it again?
Pardon me?
Perambulator.
Perambulate. A
Wow.
perambulator was an old-fashioned stroller, the thing with the hood and you lay the baby flat, has a big spoked wheels. That's a
Wow.
perambulator.
Got it.
And
I've
in
never
England, I
known.
think.
Wow.
So, and I don't know if I'm walking. I mean, because my body's back on that gurney. I'm not sure what this whole business is we got going on now. But I thought I can perambulate with intention, which is kind of funny now, but
With intention. That's
with
exceptional,
intention.
Rosemary.
You know,
You like soiree, kind of like soiree to those pearly gates.
you know. And I see that door and I'm like, hey, I've read all those NDE books. I know that that door is the point of no return. We get
Uh-huh,
through this door, all this discussion's over, and I
uh-huh,
am with my tribe forever. I am done. 59 years. I really felt, this is no joke. I really felt like I'd been granted early release for good behavior. I really did. I felt like I am off the prison planet. I
uh-huh.
am going home. I really did. Man, oh man, did I. But this white room had this white mist. The room was the most perfect white imaginable. It had this white mist, like a fog, but not cold or damp or warm or hot. It was just this mist falling, and it wasn't just falling; it was swirling around me. And I'd look around at this mist just covering me, and I thought, in fact, I asked the angels. I said, I'm trying to focus on an individual droplet of this mist, and I feel like I should be able to, but I can't. And the angels, which is crazy. Next time you're in a fog, try to focus on an individual droplet. I mean, it was crazy talk. But
Excuse me.
the angels said, it's because your spiritual eyes have not acclimated to this new environment yet. I thought, that makes sense. And they said, but what you're seeing is not a fog or a vapor. These little bits, these little droplets are actually particles of light, and you're being cleansed in preparation for heaven. And they said, it's like and these are my words, but almost like a spiritual car wash. And as a friend of mine said, leave your muddy boots at the door. You don't go into heaven. And what was explained to me is some people die with a disease process so heavily imprinted on their psyche, they
Mm-hmm,
think it's part of their identity.
mm-hmm.
And that this strips away all that, and we are restored to our innate spiritual perfection,
Which is
our
life.
innate perfection, yeah,
Which
which is
is life.
flawless.
Wow. Beautiful.
So, and I was told, and I don't know again, sequence is so hard to define. Einstein said to those of us who are committed physicists, the past, present, and future are only illusion, however persistent. So I try to put this in a chronology, but who knows what the chronology really was,
Mm-hmm,
because time is an illusion.
mm-hmm,
So at some point I get to that door, and I was told, somewhere in this white room, I was told, if you agree to return, you'll be restored to wholeness. And I thought, good to know, I'm doing the door.
mm-hmm.
And the thing is, it wasn't that you'd be healed or that this cancer will go or the grief will be diminished, but you'll be restored to wholeness. And the thing I love about that word restored is it means that you were whole before. It's not that some chunk of you's been taken out. It's that your wholeness is still there. It just needs restoration. And I really love those words. But I get to the door and I pause. Ooh, I pause at that door. By the way, the door was shut. I was a little miffed about that. I thought the door should be open, but I put my right Going home, going home. Talks about passing through an open door. That song. I'm like, yeah, that
Somebody
makes sense.
lied.
Door shouldn't be
Somebody
shut.
lied. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know. I mean, I did keep saying out of my way I'm doing the door. I think I was pretty definitive on that.
Mm-hmm.
No waffling on that one. But anyway, I put my right hand up to push through the door, and I thought, pretty interesting. Right-handed on earth, right-handed in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
That those dominant things are still in us. And I paused and I asked the angel that was with me, I said, is this the divine will for my life? That a medical mistake, and the first time I've ever had surgery, that a medical mistake would kill me. And I couldn't even I think I got 3 words out. I didn't even finish the question. And the answer was again immediate. The answer was no, this is not the divine will for your life. But
Wow.
whatever you decide, you go with all of God's love and mercy and grace and blessings and care. And I love that because that answered the prayer of, I can't handle any more decisions. I have decision fatigue. And that's a pretty big decision, decide to go to heaven or go back to earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that's good to know. I want out. I don't want to go back because I remember thinking as I'm floating away from my body, I remember thinking, we're not going to have to worry about that chemo and radiation, are we? I mean, I hadn't even had my first treatment yet.
Wow.
And I just thought, I'm out. But the angel said, yeah, whatever you decide, you go with all of God's love and blessings and care and mercy and grace. And I thought, I'll take that deal. I want out. And, somebody wrote me an email. I get a lot of emails, but somebody wrote me an email and said, how can anything be okay? How can either way you'll be blessed? And I had to quantify it and say, if we're trying to do the will of God, we're not going to go too far off course. And if we jog left when we should have jogged right, God will bring us back. We may take the long way around the barn, but that's been such a blessing in my life now. Whatever you decide, if you're really striving to listen to God, whatever you decide, you're going to be blessed. So I thought, okay, I'm taking the deal. I mean, I'm out of here. But then I was shown a vision, and vision is not a strong enough word, but I was shown an image of that kind RN who had said, honey, we have many solutions for this. I had an image of her or vision of her. She was sitting in a hospital supply room. And it's like I was a silent observer to this event. She was sitting in a hospital supply room, sitting on a little short metal stool, leaning forward, head in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably, and saying through tears, I promised that woman I wasn't going to let her die, and I lost her.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, really? We're going that way with this, are we? I thought, well, you know what? She was an RN. She's about my age. She's
Wow.
lost a bunch of people, I bet.
Yeah.
She'll get past this.
Yeah.
I thought, don't ask me to go back to that mess of a life. But then that wasn't enough. So instead of being the silent observer and watching this woman cry, now I feel her emotional angst and pain and grief. And she was overcome with grief at having promised me that she wasn't going to let me die and then losing me.
Mm.
And I felt it, and it hit me right, right in the chest, if it was such a thing could be. And I thought, oh, I recognized that grief and that guilt and that despair is what I had felt for 29 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, if I can spare one person that much pain, I have to go back. And
Wow.
boy, was that tough. So I put my right hand back to my side and I thought, I have to go back. And in a millisecond, I was back on that gurney in that hospital room. Lots of activity now. Lots of people doing lots of stuff, lots of IVs, lots of excitement. And it's so funny. The first thing, because you open your eyes, you're like, wait a second. I was dead. I was in heaven. I was at the door. And you're kind of trying to orient yourself like, what am I doing here? And I remember saying there was an angel in the upper left-hand corner of the room. And I saw this angel, just kind of, a little smiley, happy angel. And I said, what? Robert's rules of order here, point of order. There was a first, but there wasn't a second, and we were never in the discussion phase. What happened? And true story, this angel looked at me from this left corner of the room, and she looked at me and she smiled and she goes, true story. She looks at me, she goes, hi there. Good to have you back. I was like, that doesn't answer angels don't answer questions. I don't know if you know that. They do not answer questions. They just go, Hi,
Yeah,
good to
yeah.
see you.
We're showing up. Here we are.
Oh my gosh. I just couldn't believe that.
And
So,
it's not
and
like you
so
can
anyway,
you can't throat punch an angel, can you?
you
Like you
can't
did
even
with
say
me.
bad words, you know? You can't even say blankety blank you, blank blank.
Yeah,
So, what's really the first thing, you know, because I'm opening my eyes, I'm like, what just happened? I want to go back there. In fact, I told the angel, I said, do you know how much energy it took to die? That was a big deal, you
yeah.
know? But anyway, the next thing that happened was the nurse was right in my face. I mean, her face was, and I don't know if it's the same nurse or not, but she was right in my face and she said, what is your name? And I said, Rosemary. And she said, what year is it? And I said, 2018. And she said, where are you? And I said, a crummy excuse for an ER. And she, you know, she was like, she kind of stepped back. I'll have you know this is an accredited facility. So, because the interesting thing, a lot of interesting, when you bleed to death, they can't do CPR because they just push out more blood.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I was gone more than 12 minutes with no blood, no oxygen to my brain. And the medical belief is if you're gone that long, there's going to be irreversible brain damage.
Yeah.
So when they're asking me those questions, they were trying to determine if they had made the right choice in bringing me back. And I
Wow.
shared this story because I've interviewed a lot of people in writing my book, um, Remembering the Light, How Dying Saved My Life. I've interviewed a lot of people, but I talked to an anesthesiologist. And when I told him the story, he started to cry. He was retired and an older gent, but I said, what? And he said, you have no idea how relieved they were when they knew they'd done the right thing in bringing you back. He
Oh,
said, sometimes we bring back a patient after a lot less time than that, and they're just a vegetable. Or we don't use that word anymore, but they have no cognitive
yes,
abilities.
yes.
And he said, so when you were able to answer clearly and authoritatively, he said they knew they'd done the right thing. And that's a hard call. How long do you work on somebody before you
Yeah,
walk away?
sure.
So,
Yeah.
and I was in the hospital for several days. And when I was in the hospital, and this is one of the most profound elements of this, um, I had people, friends that would come in the hospital and sit with me. Because when you're impaired mentally, and I was, I mean, it took me a while to recover from bleeding to death. By the
Yes.
way, it was medically affirmed. My heart had stopped. The
Wow.
medical belief is that I went into VFib, or the medical record, I should say. I went into VFib and then had a heart attack, which was
Sure.
reflected by the elevated cardiac enzymes. And
Sure.
they told me all that stuff because I said, well, heart attack, I'm too young for a heart attack. They said, you ran out of blood, your heart stopped. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So, but I was in that hospital for 5 days. And when my friends would step out, actually, it's 4 days, when my friends would step out of the room, the angels would swarm the bed. And the angels would stand beside the bed, the left side, the right side, and the foot of the bed, and they would sing to me. And they would sing songs glorifying God. And the more they sang, they were like made of sparkles. They were like dressed in gowns of light and sparkles everywhere on them. And when they sang, their sparkles became brighter and they became brighter. And they sang songs about love and light and glorifying God. And it was too much. And I cried. And I said, don't stop, but it's too much. I don't know how to take all this in. And I said, I'm really good at architecture and houses, but not so good at memorizing lyrics and melody. And I said, I'm afraid I'll never be able to remember what you're singing to me. And
Mm.
they said very distinctly, they said, this is not for you to remember. This is for your healing. This is for your peace. And they said, this is a thank you for agreeing to come back. We
Yeah.
know how hard it is to be there and come back here.
That's
And I've
beautiful.
shared this story on probably 75 podcasts. And I can never get to the part of the angels singing without getting emotional
Yeah.
because they were so, so incredible.
Oh,
And, you know, people come back from the dead and they say they feel like they're 50% in this world and 50% in that. I didn't. I felt like I was 5% in this world and 95% in that world. And it took some time. It took about 2 months before I could even get another doctor to see me. I had to go back to the first oncologist and I said, good news, I was healed in heaven. And he said, I have better news. You start chemo on Monday. And I said, I'm declining treatment. He said, look, you have once a week chemo and daily radiation for 6 weeks. We have a 70% chance of knocking this thing out with one round, 1 6-week treatment. And he said, don't do this. And I said, I'm declining medical treatment because I was healed in heaven. And that was a bad scene. That was a very bad scene. They don't take that well. And
Mm-hmm.
I ended up having to find another oncologist in another part of my state. I had to travel some distance to get to her. She was the only one who had agreed to take the case. And 2 months later, I had another surgery, and she took lots and lots of flesh from lots and lots of places. And my friend again was waiting out in the waiting room, and he said she came out of this surgery and big smile on her face, threw her arms, the surgeon threw her arms around my friend's neck and said, "She's right. Not only is there not one cell of cancer present in her body," she said, "but her flesh is so pink and pretty and perfect. I
Oh,
wouldn't believe she ever had cancer were it not for the for what I saw before."
wow.
So it was a pretty dramatic thing. And, it cracks me up when people say, "How do you know it wasn't just your brain shutting down?" Like, well, when
Yeah.
I died, I had stage 2 cancer. When I
Yeah.
came back, not one cell. But the bigger healing, not to discount or diminish that, but the bigger healing was the healing of my soul.
Yeah.
I came home from the hospital and I had to have round the clock care for a time. But I opened my Bible, it just fell open to Psalm 23. And the verse, "He restoreth my soul," seemed to be illuminated. And I thought, that's my healing.
Mm.
My soul was restored. It was completely restored.
Oh,
And it took days, but I was able to let go of all that guilt. I used to remember so many arguments I'd had with my husband. And I would say, "No wonder he killed himself. You were a terrible wife." And, what do you do with that?
yeah.
But after this, I would still hear that voice. I'd remember those arguments that I'd say, "No, this is healed. This is over. I've been set free." I mean, it literally felt like somebody had opened the prison door and said, "Listen, you don't need to do this anymore. You
Yeah.
don't need to serve any more time because you've been wrong. You didn't kill this man. You didn't contribute to this. You prayed for him. You did everything you could for him."
Yeah.
And it was so liberating. And it did take, honestly, I'd say it took 2 or 3 years for that to really sink into my soul. I
Yeah.
mean, this happened 5 years ago now. And it just took some time to sink in that I had really been liberated. And even now, sometimes I have those thoughts about, "Well, look what happened. Look what you did." And I think, no, no, I don't play that part anymore. I'm not going to get up on that stage anymore and participate in that. And I just can't tell you. There's a Bible verse, "Whom the Lord sets free is free indeed." I have been set free, and that's the real healing. And I wish I could tell everybody who's been a victim of a suicide like I was, because I was a victim, and just say, there is nothing you could have done to make this happen, and there is nothing you could have done to stop this from happening. You did all the right things, and you have got to forgive yourself and let go of the guilt. Did you know the word guilt is the same word as the same etymology as the word beguile? And in the Bible, it says the serpent beguiled Eve. And I
Mm.
think about, he beguiled her. He got her on a guilt trip
Mm-hmm.
and
It's
ruined her life.
it's one of the lowest vibrational words that we or emotions that we feel. It's just like, and it's all consuming. But
Yeah.
what I wanted to honor you, if I may, is how you took responsibility with that first surgeon. You became the CEO of your decision. You became the CEO of your life, and you were like, hell no. Like, and no matter, because that comes with judgment, massive judgment. But to do that for oneself is remarkable. It's incredible. And I just want to honor you in that, because I think so many of
Thank you.
us, um, and I'm generalizing, but so many of us actually, we entrusting of those wonderful human beings that perhaps don't know better than ourselves. In the moment, that must have taken big, big kahunas to go, nope, I know
It
what's best
did.
for me, and because so many of us, we go to that fearful place of like, okay, well, you know better, so you tell me what's good for my body. And a lot of times, humans just give themselves over, not even knowing, and it's not right, it's not wrong. They just do. So that must have taken a huge amount to have pushed through.
I think a lot of it came from the angels. I think the best qualities we have are from God. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think we generate them, because how can
Mm-hmm.
we generate love? How can we generate forgiveness?
Mm-hmm.
And I was frightened. And in those 2 months it took, because it turns out when you tell a doctor you bled to death from a simple biopsy, they're pretty frightened. They want to make sure you have time to be healed and everything. But in that interim between my own diagnosis and then dying and then coming back, I did a lot of praying. I kind of sequestered myself from society, and I did a lot of praying just so I would know that that was the right decision. Because that doctor's office, the first doctor's office, called me many times, and they said, "You're going to die. We're trying to help you." And I
Mm-hmm.
finally just stopped answering the phone. And God bless them. They were doing what they thought was their highest sense of right.
Mm-hmm.
But I I prayed a lot. One of the things I did, I went on YouTube and I found every story I could find of somebody who was healed of a terminal disease, a potentially life-threatening disease, I should say, by radical reliance on spiritual healing. So I listened to every YouTube, and then I would write their name on a piece of paper beside me. And I put healed of life-threatening illness, and then I would write their name. And I just kept this list going of more and more and more names I found of people who had been healed just by prayer. And every day I'd look at that list and I would tell myself, I'd say, one day, Rosemary Thornton is going to be on that list.
Wow.
You've been healed. You got to trust it. You got to believe it, that God took you to heaven for healing. And and it happened. I mean, and I know I was very blessed to be able to just kind of withdraw from society for 2 months and get myself right. And a consequence of this, after the second diagnosis, I was very grateful. Every day I thank God for the healing. I try to remember every day to thank God. I mean, it's been 5 years, but just say, God, thank you for that. I know that was grace. I did nothing to deserve that. I'm not special. I mean, I know people die of this, and I'm not special. I don't know why I was healed. And you can't say, well, she was healed for this reason and she wasn't for this reason. We don't know. It's just that sometimes it's just the grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really anybody that special, really. I mean, I guess I'm special to those in my circle. But anyway, I digress. It's just I try to be grateful every single day for that healing. And I know a lot of people have felt blessed by the story, and I'm really, really grateful for that. But
Yeah.
it's very dramatic. But the bigger healing really was that all that grief was lifted off of me. Before his death, I thought about killing myself pretty much every single day. Did you know victims of suicide, or what do you call suicide survivors like me, are 12 to 48 times more likely than the average population to end their own life? So if we want to identify a specific risk group, find people who've lost a spouse or a child to suicide. Find them, help them, heal them, be friends with them. But we
Yeah.
don't. We do the opposite.
Yeah.
So we know a risk group. I'm in a social media group of women who have survived the suicide of their husband. And it's got, I think, over 1,000 women in it right now. But in that group, 3 women have already killed themselves.
Sure.
And yeah, so, we know who's going to do it. We have a template for who's going to probably kill themselves. And it's somebody who's lost someone else to suicide. We have got to figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah.
I don't
Absolutely.
know, I'm going into rant mode again, but yes, it was a very profound healing and changed me. What I was going to say, I sold everything I owned. After I came back from the dead, I sold all my earthly possessions and moved 1,000 miles due west. I live in the Midwest now, the Midwestern part of the United States. I was
Mm-hmm.
living on the East Coast. And in the Midwest, it's more agricultural, and there's a lot of beautiful things to see. And I just like watching things grow. We have a lot of farms out here. We grow corn, soybeans, and something else. But I just like watching things grow. I just find it fascinating. You can bury something in the dirt and trounce on it, and then
Mm-hmm.
just wait for the rain and the sun and the air, and things grow out of dirt. Talk about humble beginnings. So I love watching things grow. I love watching the clouds. I love watching the sky and the clouds roll across the sky.
Wow.
So
Beautiful.
I sold all my earthly possessions to do that. Pretty
Beautiful.
big change.
Well, I'm consciously aware of our time. I could speak to you probably for the rest of the day, and and I'm like, where do we go from here? And my timekeepers are going, Michelle, it's time, it's time. You got to stop, you got to stop, because I know we have communicated about your time. But I am so, so grateful, and I'm going to say to you, you are special. And we are
Oh,
so
thank you.
lucky to have had the angels give you a right real kick in the butt to come back into your body. Because I feel like there's probably more little negotiation there. You were like, "Ha, really?"
Oh, man. I
Yeah,
still get miffed when I think about it. You know,
yeah.
I actually Googled, I've been talking to friends because, of course, some of my friends now have had NDEs. I mean, those are the people we can tend to cluster
Uh-huh.
together. But I was talking to one of my friends. I said, "Were you really depressed the first couple of years after you came back?" And they go, "Yes." So depression's a real thing, you know? You come back from this and you think, "What am I doing here?" You know,
Yes.
I was this close. And I mean, I guess there's stories of people who go, "Oh, please let me go back." But overwhelmingly, the story you hear is, "Don't make me go back," you know,
Yes.
overwhelmingly.
Yes. Well, I'm just actually looking because I don't know if you know Dr. Scott Taylor. Have you heard of Dr. Scott Taylor?
I
Um,
have not.
he was a guest a few weeks ago, and he also did a lot of research on NDEs. He had a lot of clients that he had spoken to, and the one story, and your story almost sounds so familiar. That's why I was asking you if you know of him, because I just remember, and I've been repeating this to friends in the last few weeks, how this one woman had was riddled with cancer. She was operated on and left her body, and she was negotiating with Saint Peter at the pearly gates. And Saint Peter, she's like, "Let me in. My tribe is there. I'm going through." And St. Peter's like, "Well, you know what? I'll let you come in for the weekend, however long that is, and come and come and go to the museums and check out the art, and go to the different galleries. If you're going back." And she sort of went and hung out, however long that was, in angelic time or God's time, and came back apparently, and before she was coming back into her body, she said, "Right, if I'm going to go back, one more negotiation. I want to be cancer free." Anyway, came back into her body, and she was in her recovery room, and she woke up and she said to the specialist, "I need to have another scan because I don't have cancer." Because he was like, "No, I'm really, really sorry. We've opened you up and you are completely riddled with cancer." And she's like, "No, I'm not." He says, "What do you mean? You're in the recovery room. I operated on you like a few hours ago, however long it was." And she negotiated. They took her for a scan, and she was cancer free. And the surgeon was obviously astounded, like couldn't understand how this happened. But I've chuckled because I was like, I wonder if you're the same woman that negotiated,
This, no,
because it seems very
no,
parallel. um, but I am so,
no.
so grateful, and I'd love to have you back again. So please just mention your book, your last book, because I can only imagine 15 million people, but you are touching lives around the world, and with your
Oh,
beautiful
thank you.
story and your humor is Mike. It's kind of like it sits on the fence of like a little bit dark, when people are like, "Oh, how do you take her?" But I love it. I
Well, you
love
know,
it. Love it.
one of my emails was, "Why are you joking about something so serious?" I'm like, "Well, what? You know, what's so serious? I mean, you either joke, you either laugh about it or you dip it,
100%.
go into misery and despair." But yeah, I mean, I have earned the right to joke about anything I want to. You
Yes.
know, I have paid my dues into the bank of suffering. And
Yes.
the people, I have several friends now who've lost somebody to suicide because we tend to congregate too. And
Yes.
it's, it is kind of a coping mechanism. But anyway, my book is Remembering the Light, How Dying Saved My Life. And I'm
Mm.
trying to get it, it's on audiobook. I'm just about ready to have it go into the world. So it's being turned into an audiobook. And then the website is temporarydeath.com. That's where people can contact me. And I
Mm.
prefer the idea, people talk about near death. I prefer temporary death. I was not near death. I was dead for
Yes.
more than 10 minutes. I
Yes.
was temporarily dead. So I call it my TDE, my temporary death experience. But yes, that's my website.
Awesome. And Rosemary, do you have a page for support or something where people who have lost loved ones to suicide that they can perhaps connect with or join or
Oh boy, that's a really good question. I don't. I
okay,
don't. There's a Facebook group I'm a member of for suicide survivors, and that's been a great blessing. Oh
okay.
boy, those women have saved me.
Yeah.
That's been a great blessing, but I really don't have a page per se. I do get a lot of emails from people just sharing their story.
No, that's awesome, and you are 100% correct. You know, it's something that I feel incredibly blessed to play my part of being a medium and talking to spirit, you know, to the loved ones who's passed over, because there's always a misconception around they're selfish that they took their lives, da 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 da. But you know, you said it in the beginning of our conversation and our connection that they're just in that space, and you know, they just cannot come out of it. And it's just incredibly, incredibly sad, but more devastating for the loved ones who are left behind, as you've explained to us today.
Very much so.
So
Very
thank you
much
for
so.
that. And I keep, you know, the gentleman who passed over this last week, I keep thinking about his girlfriend and his dog, and you given me an opportunity to go and say, can I walk the dog? Because we all loved looking at and, you know, seeing the dog, beautiful, beautiful dog at the coffee shop. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being here and keeping it real. And I'm absolutely delighted to have spent this time with you. And you're an angel in your own
Thank you.
way. And when I
Thank
buy
you.
a white carpet, if I ever do, I will think of you. In my head, I'm like, damn it, white. Like, who the hell buys white, man? But you said it was a pretty carpet. So,
It was so pretty. It was off-white. It wasn't true white. But
okay.
yeah, next time I buy carpet, I'm still going back with off-white. Oh,
So,
it's so pretty.
so for those of us who are overthinkers, it actually comes in handy at certain times, eh? What do you say
Absolutely.
about that? Yeah, but thank you so much for your time, and I'm so grateful to have you here. So we look
Thank
forward
you.
to having you again. Guys, thank
That
you for
sounds
joining
great.
us on Keeping It Real, and please, oh, where do we find your book? So it's on Audible and
Amazon. It's not quite
Amazon.
up on Audible yet, but it will be very soon. But it's at
Fantastic.
Amazon.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. I'll put all Rosemary's details, and as you're well aware that, you know, these daily grinds in which we are all working through on this earth. Some of us are, you know, I've explained it many a times that sometimes we have these massive, beautiful highs, and other times, poof, you know, we hear of somebody, you know, to losing their life to suicide. So please reach out and know that we're all in this together. So from my heart to all of you, I love you, and you know, love is why we are here. Take care, guys. Bye.